Hi, welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to be in a comedy improv group together back when we were 19, and then we lost touch.
A few years ago, we found each other and discovered we're both painters,
Performers
animal lovers,
and Pilates teachers.
and naturalists.
Elizabeth, I'm not a naturalist,
Oh,
but I love nature.
well, that counts. The point is, we're
We're long
lost
friends,
friends.
and we're both award-winning fiction writers.
After one of my stories appeared in MetaStellar, we started the show.
So MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online speculative, I'm having trouble saying speculative today, but speculative fiction magazine. And we publish original horror, science fiction, and fantasy. There's a link below. You can check us out.
Today, we are so excited to have Nick Olson joining us.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nick. Nick is an author of the novels Here's Waldo and The Brothers We Share, and is the editor-in-chief of Macro Mike. His third novel, Afterglow, is out this June 2022. He's also a Best Small Fictions nominee, a finalist for Glimmer Train's Very Short Fiction Award, and a 2021 Wig Leaf Longlister. In and from Chicagoland, Nick's been published in Smoke Long Quarterly, Hobart, Fiction Southeast, and many other fine places. So welcome, Nick.
Yes, welcome. But before we start talking, show us your pets.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So we've got 4 cats, but let me try to get one of them.
Okay.
Oh,
This is Biddy,
Kitty?
a complete marshmallow cloud.
Oh,
I'm going to try to get Poe, but she gets very angry.
I think Biddy looks like she's on Quaaludes or something. She's very mellow.
Kitty looks very.
It's actually being on her best behavior.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
look.
like my
When
kitty.
she'll like hiss at you, even though she's also purring.
Yeah.
The phrase we use with Poe is that feelings are hard.
So behind Elizabeth, we have the cover for your new novel coming out, Afterglow, and we would love to chat with you a little bit about that novel. Sorry, excuse me. I had a chance to read it and really enjoyed it. It is such an interesting concept. So how did you come up? For everyone watching, it is a novel in flash.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it was I say that it was something that I wanted to do for a long time. And I did what was probably, I would say, a really risky thing, which was not kind of plan it or outline it whatsoever. I kind of knew I wanted to do this thing. I wanted to do a novel in flash in general, and I definitely wanted to do a spec fic novel. I'd never done that before. My first 2 are just kind of like literary realism, I guess you could say. And yeah, so I just kind of jumped in the deep end. I did the first story, and as I was putting it together, I was kind of just figuring out where it was going. And I think in general, it worked out. I'm not sure that'll ever work out again, but it was just one of those like happy moments where like pretty much the thing as it is, complete is pretty much what I had in mind or what I was hoping for. Yeah, I don't know if that'll ever happen again, but it was a lot of fun putting it together, and kind of also having to keep track of a lot of these threads, because I have like definitely over 12 characters, I'd say, that we really focus on in there. And, some of them are kind of in our general timeline. Some of them are very far in the future. Some of them are, so it was a lot of kind of like wrangling storylines while I was going. I think part of it that helped was, for the most part, I did these on the weekend. So like during the week, that was just kind of my time to research and do like generative stuff and kind of decompress from it. And then in the weekend, I would just kind of like knock out at least a story. Toward the end, it was like 2 stories, and then the last the last four I just kind of did in one weekend because I was just really excited to finish it. It was
Sure.
the final stretch. But yeah, it was. I've never done a book like that. I'm not sure I ever will again, but it was a lot of fun.
Did you
Well,
have flashes of inspiration? Did you know sort of where you were going, or did it just you sit down and you're like, I don't know where I'm going, but oh, suddenly it's here?
It was more the latter. Yeah, it was more just kind of like going where where the dopamine and where the interest was taking me. And so a lot of it was just, I'm very research intensive. So a lot of it was just diving into a ton of research and then kind of writing a lot of the stuff that I had always been really interested in, but hadn't done. So like speculative fiction has been like one of my, go-to genres ever since I was a kid. And the first book before Here's Waldo, so this is my first book, but before this one, I worked on a speculative fiction novel back in like 2013, and nothing happened with that one, but I actually recycled one of the characters. One of the main characters in Afterglow Wi-Fi is originally from that first book. And so it was, I think part of what helped with this kind of like ad hoc way of kind of improvising the novel was the fact that I had these ideas and these concepts and like this drive to do something like this for close to a decade. So I think part of it was just kind of like letting it percolate in the background while I was doing my other stuff, and just kind of living my life. And then once I actually sat down and did the work, it was just kind of like a waterfall.
I mean, you cover so many different kinds of things, like, and I can't even say them all because some of them were so foreign to me. Some of your technological things, I kind of went, I have no idea what he's saying right now. But it all came together. I mean, it worked, but there were a couple of chapters where I just like, what that's about. But I mean, you've got all the evolution that changes. That was really interesting to me, all the weird creatures that the humans became. And the idea of the transhumanism, which Elizabeth and I will admit we looked up yesterday to understand exactly what that meant.
Yeah.
But that was what Michael and all those people became, right? The mechanical people.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, all those ideas, you had so many different threads going.
Yeah.
It was
one of the, to kind of like piggyback off of that. One of the things I think was cool was that while I was writing this, the only other person who was really keeping up with it was Harmony. I would basically finish a story, and then Harmony's my partner. She also did the cover art for the book. So I would kind of finish a story and then read it out to her. So I think that informed like the way I was writing this too. I was being able to still have it. I think, it helps to make any story kind of be able to work in that read out loud setting, but it really helped with this. And yeah, a lot of that was, again, just me kind of really being interested in this stuff. I'm a super nerd. I was making websites when I was like 7 years old and just when it was basically like the Wild West of the original kind of World Wide Web. And these are just things I've always been interested in, and that I really wanted to explore, especially with like going beyond humanity, and whether that's in a technological way and like the metal people, eventually like the metal refugees, like you were talking about, or speculative evolution. There's I went on a huge rabbit hole with Spec Evo, because there are like Man After Man is a really good book that dives into that. I like a lot of like the Mad Adam series, that has some really cool Spec Evo. And then there's this book by Will Self, The Book of Dave. And that one kind of takes some touchstones from Ridley Walker, which I would say out of every book, that's the one that kind of really inspired me to just go for it. Because that was kind of the thing that I was telling myself, and I was telling Harmony while I was doing it, is that I was like, at the end of the day, whether or not everything lands, I want it to be where no one can say I didn't go for it. I wanted to just at the end of the day lay it all out and really kind of swing for the fences with a lot of these concepts. Because I don't know if I'll write another book like this, so I kind of wanted to just
to do it all.
Yeah.
And Ridley Walk, I was just going to say Ridley Walker, you and I had touched on that before, because I remember reading that a long time ago and being really at the time struggling with the language and then really enjoying it once. It was like reading a foreign language, you know, at first.
Yeah. And and there was there's one chapter, a really short chapter, where I directly homage Ridley on purpose. But for the most part, I didn't want to necessarily go in that direction. I obviously really respect it. And I mean, when I read that book, I was, I think the first semester in like art school, and it changed my entire conception of like what you could do with language, with storytelling. It changed a lot for me. So I wanted to not necessarily do the same thing with language, but kind of like follow the spirit of that with some of the concepts I was going into. And another thing I'm really interested in is just kind of look, I mean, it's part of why I call the magazine that I run Macro Mike, because I'm really interested in looking at the micro, that kind of as above, so below kind of thing. And so that was a lot of fun too, being able to look at just these tiny moments that completely changed the course of human history. And that was a lot of fun too, like being able to look at this kid, Will Foster, who kind of grows up poor and he's kind of sketching robots onto like loose leaf paper. And he ends up, you know, years later writing this book, and that ends up, you know, kind of influencing people who were inspired by like his fiction of the possible. And that, you know, led to like consciousness uploading processes and just people being able to put their consciousness in stasis and upload themselves to like robotic bodies, all because of this little kid who wanted to sketch a robot onto paper, you know. And that's always been really fascinating to me, just looking at kind of butterfly effect situations, or being able to explore that, where even though it seems like there's no connection between these people, these times, there's a chain of causality there.
How do you think, I mean, do you see any of the things you came up with actually happening?
So that's a really good question. I wanted to make it where these things conceivably could happen, but I wasn't necessarily trying to completely predict the future. I kind of wanted to do more like thematic stuff and things that got my message across, I guess, if that makes sense, and got communicated theme, but I didn't necessarily want to get into like, this is going to happen. I was more.
I hope it doesn't, Nick. I hope it doesn't.
Yeah, right.
Grim. It's not grim in the end. I mean, it kind of has this lovely arc that it takes. That's not all grim, and I think you gave us such permission as writers to look at a form a little differently. I've seen books that are short, or collections of flash, collections of short stories, but I haven't seen a book in flash. There probably are, but I haven't seen one before, and it's such a fun way to go. I can see why you had fun with it.
And did you publish them as individuals at all?
Yeah, I got maybe like 10 or so. I don't remember the exact number, but that was kind of, I did that with Here's Waldo and The Brother We Share, my first two books, where it was honestly kind of my way of testing the waters and being like, do people want to read this? And, you know, like one of my first big pubs was a story I landed in Smoke Lawn Quarterly that was pretty much just kind of like an offshoot flash version of my first book, Here's Waldo. And, you know, Smoke Lawn was like a dream of mine. And so once I landed that, like, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of unsure about the book until that happened. And I was like, okay, there's something here, I can do that. So yeah, that's kind of become, I guess, like a, and yeah, it was, I'm trying to think of where else I was going to go with that. But yeah, I pretty much just, that's what I was going to say. So for the first two books, I kind of had this tendency since like 2014, where I'll kind of have a bigger novel usually that I'm working on, and then I try to write at least one flash piece per week. And so I'd kind of juggle those two projects at once. And so it actually, Afterglow was a much easier process than the first two books in some ways, because I just combined that. Instead of working on this big project and doing the Flash a week, it kind of felt like I was, kind of getting an easier version, because I was like, oh, I just need to do one Flash per week, and that's going to become the book. So that was, and I had never done anything like that. I'll admit, I've never read a novel in Flash. I know that there are a bunch of really good ones out there, but I had never done it. And Flash was my way into fiction. I went to school for screenwriting, and literally I took one fiction class. The rest was just all, writing for film. And my last semester, I was like, you know what? I think I want to switch over to fiction. And so I graduated, and then I just I winged it. I just kind of improv'd and figured out the structure of Flash. And I just kind of learned by doing, kind of trial by fire, I guess you could say.
Well,
Are you doing? Oh, I was just gonna say
sorry.
anything in between. Anything in between Flash or novels?
No, that's the funny thing. I think I really like, I like really short stuff and really long stuff. I have it, like I did some like more traditional short story length work for that one fiction class I took. But it's not something, and it's something I respect and I love the form, but it's not really something I do for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but I just really like short stuff and long stuff.
Do you find though that like the shorts, obviously short stuff can grow into the novel stuff? Do you also feel like that could even grow into a screenplay? Because sometimes I feel like, screenplays really, they require there's so much visual. They require very little actual language and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I've definitely thought about that. And I think it's also informed my work the other way as well. I've gotten a bunch of notes from people where like my fiction kind of sounds different, or it's very visual, and a lot of what I said, especially at first, was it was pretty unavoidable for me, because that was kind of what we had drilled into our heads. It's a screenplay is just what you can see and hear, what can be on a film. And so there's also not a lot of interiority. So that was something that was a challenge, but also super exciting for me to finally be able to kind of dive into that, because I was always a screenwriter that sounded more like a fiction writer. And then when I started, my fiction sounded a little bit more like a screenplay. So at first I was really self-conscious about that. And then somewhere along the way, I was like, let me lean into it. Like if there's something about my style that's a little different, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Now, did you, and Afterglow, I just have one question I'm curious about. Did you write it consistently like this, or did you jump around like, oh, I know this is going to happen, so I'm going to write this little bit of Flash, even though it doesn't come till later?
Yeah, it was sequential, and which is funny too, because when I finished it and when I was getting towards the end, I was talking to Honey about, I was like, I need to figure out the order of this, and I might kind of mess with like the timeline and stuff. And we were really looking at it, and I was trying to figure it out. And then she was like, the order you wrote it in kind of already works, because you're little by little kind of expanding this world almost in like concentric circles, and just kind of going out and learning more about it, and it just kind of fit more. And so while I was writing it in that sequence, there are times where you're kind of jumping far in the future, jumping back, but I think there was usually at least something either tenuous or direct that linked the previous Flash to the next one. Or sometimes it was just kind of like, all right, and not to paraphrase Monty Python, but like now I have something completely different, just kind of shifting and then coming back to it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job. Sorry, Elizabeth and I are interrupting each other a lot. A nice job with kind of keeping us, reminding us who the characters. So like we didn't stay away from someone for too long. We came back, so you didn't lose them in the narrative. You did it. I think you naturally just sort of knew, oh, I've got to get back to Wi-Fi, or I've got to get back to Michael, or.
Cool. That's good to hear, because I was hoping for that. I wasn't sure if it worked.
Do you
definitely.
think any of it's like a warning, like you want your readers or whatever to read it and say, look, we could be going here, let's
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to go back off of what you were asking before with, do I think that this will happen? It was more, I don't necessarily think this will happen. I think versions of some of these things could happen, especially with climate change and disruption. I think that's just kind of a given. But some of the AI stuff was kind of skirting the edge with it. So there's one specific story where it starts with the disclaimer and it says something to the effect of, a person came up with the title in the first sentence, an AI then generated the rest. When one of my buddies, he's also a writer, Dustin Pellegrini, amazing writer. He read the book and he was like, oh, that was a pretty clever kind of way to frame that story. And I was like, no, that's actually true. In the first draft for the disclaimer, I put Nick Olson came up with the title in the first sentence, but then I changed it and just said a person, because I did find an AI text generator, and I fed it the title and I fed it the first sentence. And then in separate kind of like 150 to 200 word chunks, I just had it generate material, and that's what it came up with. And it kind of helped, and was also the story was about kind of AI coming alive and kind of becoming sentient, or at least seeming to become sentient or aware. And so that was one direct one where I was just like, we have these tools right now, and these do have the potential to do some incredible things, but they're also at least mildly terrifying, I would say.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It makes me think a little bit, I don't know if it was Man in the High Castle, not the TV show, obviously, but the book where Philip K. Dick actually would throw the I Ching to see what his next chapter was going to be, which always seemed really difficult, but that's fascinating. I mean, I hope you put that like in an afterword or something like.
Yeah, I maybe I should, I guess. But yeah, that was, I've always loved kind of doing things like that and getting really kind of invested in the world that I'm writing. And I'm definitely a big believer in like no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No, so I don't know if method writing is a thing, but if it is, like I've dialed it back a little bit in recent years, but especially with my first couple of books, like I went really kind of intensely in that world and in that headspace that I was writing. And I think it's fascinating to do that, because once you open yourself up to that, there is so much kind of like synchronicity that comes out of it once you allow yourself to try that.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. I know murder writers I was talking to, he was like, chained in his trunk for whatever, 12 hours so he could write about it realistically.
Right.
And as Sir Laurence Olivier would say,
Yeah.
it's acting.
Right, exactly.
Right.
There's a great profession. It's called fiction writing.
Exactly. Like there's always the counterpoint to it. And that,
Right.
I think that's part of why I've kind of dialed it back and just kind of leaned more into research, because also just from a practical standpoint, it can get pretty taxing with the first two books that I wrote. They were very kind of intensely internal and dealing with some heavy kind of stuff with trauma and just memory and family and growing up, kind of coming of age stuff. And so this was my chance to kind of turn the camera outward and be like, all right, I did these two books that I needed to do, and now I can do this fun book that I want to do,
Nice. And you've got it really interesting. I like the religious cult world that comes out in in the novel. Do you pronounce them? Is it Gammy? Is that
Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah, that's what I had in my mind when I did it. Yeah, the children of the great and mysterious internet.
Of the great and mysterious internet. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. It's great. I love that, because the cult and the religion. Of course, there's going to be a new religion. Of course, there is at least 1 or 10.
Right.
And there's probably going to be a time when there are a whole bunch of them. That's usually what happens. A whole bunch start, and then
yeah, and that was something that also came from a lot of fiction that I really loved, but also just a lot of just concepts that I really liked, of like anachronisms, or people in the future taking things from our time or the recent past and distorting them, sometimes intentionally, sometimes they don't mean to. But yeah, like A Canticle for Leibowitz, that was something that did a great job with that. I don't want to have too many spoilers, but there's this document, this kind of sacred document that one of the characters finds, and it turns out just to be kind of like a blueprint for a building that they uncovered in the far future. But it becomes, it's almost this is the meaning that we make from this activity, is that kind of more, it doesn't necessarily matter what the thing is, it's more kind of the meaning we get out of it. And so yeah, I wanted to have these characters that they find like laptop computers, but to them it's, they don't have any concept of what the internet was, or how these things really worked. They know that these were relics of great importance, but a lot of that is just importance that they kind of imbue in these objects. And yeah, it was fun too to look at some of these groups, and especially as they changed over time, because I didn't want to necessarily paint any one group as just all bad all the time. I wanted to look at kind of the nuance of it. And a lot of our characters that you could argue, well, are definitely our protagonists, and I would argue are, pretty good and decent people. They had connections with these groups, and it was a lot more kind of messy and complicated to look at it in that way. Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, but that's about all I'll say.
Sure. But that is kind of one of the things that's nice, is someone is a part of something and it ends up not being good ultimately, and then all of a sudden they're not, part of it, because they're still good,
Right.
in a way.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's really not a spoiler, because no one's going to know who we're talking about until they read it.
Right. Exactly. You skirted the edge of that better than I could have. So yeah.
Right. No, that's fascinating. I mean, and development of religions from artifacts where really there's no relation between what they believe the meaning is and what it actually was.
Right.
Yeah,
and so much of it just becomes apocryphal. And when I was kind of digging into and I was raised going to like CCD and stuff like that, and going to church, and so that kind of informed it too, especially when I was a teenager and kind of like challenging authority and wanting to kind of chart my own path, but also looking at a lot of these stories of saints and people where you can kind of get the official dogma, and then the further you dig, you start to get an idea of who these people actually were. And that was something that fascinated me too. And that's something that I wanted to explore with Wi-Fi and Michael, like especially Michael, he's just someone from our general time period. He's a bit in the future, but I mean, the world I kind of am in is very recognizable. It's kind of extrapolated off of our own world. It's not super fantastical, but because of certain things that happen, he becomes this mythical, legendary figure, and really he's just a guy, and so that was fun for me to look at too, of just kind of deconstructing a lot of the myth making and the deifying of people, when at the end of the day, like not only were these just regular people, but a lot of the time they came to mean just by invoking their name is not at all what they intended in their time.
Yeah, it really is interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah, and it goes on forever. I mean, you look back at saints and you delve into them, or you find out they're going to be desanctified or whatever because of something.
Well,
thank you so much for talking to us about this book. It sounds fascinating. Yes. And it also, I really like the idea, for so many reasons, of doing little bits of flash that make up a whole.
I know, it's fantastic. I'm thinking I want to try that.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, because I've written, because novels are just like, I'm always like, I'm never writing another novel. I'm just sticking to shorts. But I'm like, well, but shorts, that's a way to do it. And I really like that.
I will forever sing its praises. Doing a novel in Flash was one of the most fun things that I've done. So do it.
Yay.
I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. And we always end with the best thing we learned this week. So should I start?
You always start, Elizabeth. So yes, you should start. Elizabeth is our fascinating science naturalist.
Naturalist. Well, I don't know, as some people who watch may know, I've been in Bonaire for the past 3 months, working on a coral restoration project. So basically there are these little PCV pipe trees that we hang little coral fragments on, and then you have to clean them all the time because algae or fire coral, which isn't really coral, it's more like related to a jellyfish, will grow and smother them. So I've been cleaning that, and with diving, shallow dives a lot. We use air and nitrox. It's better for you. But if you do really deep dives, like 200 feet, and you're living there working on pipes or whatever, they use a mixture of helium and oxygen. And so they're all these huge, big, tough guys, and they're like this because they have helium. But actually, in the place where they're living, they change the sound system so they still sound deep. But I like to imagine them with their little voices. So I guess that's my fun fact.
That's very funny. Not what I expected. But she just saying, well, I spent 3 months in Bonaire. You're like, okay, if it were competition, you just won the segment. So I just, as always, just sort of go on the internet and try to find good news instead of bad news. And one of the cool things I saw was that in Ecuador, they have discovered some new glass frogs. And they've 2 species that look identical till they looked at them like, their genetic makeup or whatever. But oh my God, I don't know if you've ever seen them, Nick. Elizabeth's nodding, she's seen them. You can see through their skin and see all their organs. I've never seen them before. I thought that was the coolest thing. The ones that they just found are like glass.
They're pretty.
Hence the name, glass frog. Huh?
Costa Rica has some too.
Wow, they're awesome.
They're pretty cool.
All right,
Nick,
I got a pretty short one. I kind of did a similar thing to Andrea and just looked up some of these facts. Apparently, this was news to me. Mel Brooks hired David Lynch to direct The Elephant Man, and he also hired David Cronenberg to direct The Fly. And then he actually removed his producing credit from both of those films to make sure that the films were taken seriously and that they weren't kind of associated with like his comedy legacy. I just thought that was really
wow.
I had no idea.
So and then he didn't like erase it from history, so you could find that information somewhere.
Yeah. With that factoid, someone included like old shots of him with like the rest of the crew and like David Lynch and everything for when he shot The Elephant Man. Pretty wild. I would never expect
That's
that.
really cool.
You said.
And and when you started to go through saying he did David Lynch and David Cronenberg, I thought you were on some David thing, like, and then every person he's ever hired is named David, and all his sons are David. And
even the women have to change their names to David. Actually, when I first heard it, I heard Mel Brooks, but my mind went Mel Gibson, and I went, "Oh, it's wise to take his name off it."
That'd be a very different story.
Very different. Wow, right. That's interesting. That's cool. Yeah. That is a cool.
The Last Temptation of the Elephant Man or something. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to talking to you again. We also want to thank our wonderful producer, Maria Korloff. We couldn't do it without you, and help from Alex Korloff and original music from Kevin Scott. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and please, if you like this video, give us a little thumbs up, and I can't even talk. See, it's a day I can't talk. And leave comments below, and be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button so that you will get updates and you won't miss any new episodes. And if you want to support our publication and help us publish more original fiction, please support our Patreon page. And all of the monies that go there go directly to the writers for the new fiction. The entire staff, all of us are all just volunteers who support it. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.